pent up, and I wanted to get a little outlet there before we go to the last part of our. Thank you in all seriousness. I can't tell you how helpful and important it is, and Senator Migden and I had this conversation before, ranging for days here. It's more important than you can possibly know that we hear directly from people who are on the ground and who are living with the consequences of decisions that get made. It's a big state, 37 million folks, and the only way we stay in touch is by hearing directly from folks. And too often, it's hard for folks to make their way to Sacramento, and that's why we hold field hearings like this one, to make sure we hear firsthand. We do want to hear from a couple of folks who've been very patient and waited through our public comment on public health considerations. And then if there is time and he is still here, I am still open to hearing from Paul Schrenke on the ecological and environmental considerations. But let's bring Wendell Brunner and Fred Schwartz forward. Dr. Brunner is the Director of Public Health for Contra Costa County, and Dr. Schwartz is the Public Health Officer for the County of Marin. And I think actually having had the public comment will give us a little framework of reference actually for some of the comments that you might make. Gentlemen, thank you again for being here, and thank you for your flexibility in terms of the time today. It's very gracious indeed. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. I'm Dr. Fred Schwartz, Marin County Public Health Officer since 1994 and a resident of the county for over 21 years. I want to thank you for inviting us here this afternoon. And I would just like to very quickly, in about 2 or 3 minutes, because I know it's late, set some context for you about how the discussions among health officers in the Bay Area are carried out. So Bay Area health officers typically communicate and collaborate about issues of local and regional concern. And one of the ways we do this is through the long-standing Association of Bay Area Health Officials, or ABAHO, which meets bi-monthly, bringing together health department directors and health officers from Napa in the north to Monterey in the south. And as an example of this, there's an ABAHO committee of health officers, deputy health officers, and public health preparedness coordinators that has been engaged in regional planning for pandemic influenza response, developing strategies for community disease mitigation and public information in an effort to make these timely and consistent across the region should we ever have to deal with pandemic flu. And we've discussed LBAM through ABAHO and other means. And today Dr. Brunner and I are here to discuss public health considerations and concerns about the proposed LBAM area spraying. We're representing our own views, but based on the discussions that we've had with our colleagues, we feel that we are being consistent with the views of these colleagues in public health around the Bay Area. I also want to say that health officers may at times consult with the Environmental Health Investigations Branch of the California Department of Public Health, which is not represented here today, as well as the Cal EPA Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, WEHA, about things such as conducting or interpreting findings of health risk assessments and analysis of potential community impacts, including vulnerable or sensitive populations whenever there are concerns about potential health hazards. I think you'll be interested to know that EHAB has convened a series of conference calls with regional health officers to discuss public health concerns and possible responses related to the LBAM control programs. These discussions are ongoing, and some of the issues that have come up in these discussions from the health officers have included the need for an independent health risk assessment, completion of the current analysis of health complaints from residents of Santa Cruz and Monterey counties, development and dissemination of additional public information, education of healthcare providers about any spraying that might occur, evaluation of symptom complaints and reporting, implementation by EHIB of a regional surveillance methodology, and assurance of notification of residents well in advance of any spraying, including preventive measures should these ever be indicated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Yes, I'm Dr. Wendell Brunner. I'm the Director of Public Health for Contra Costa Health Services.
This is easier than the public health. I just thought it would be doctor, and I know I'm talking to the right person.
And as Dr. Schwartz said, we are speaking for ourselves, but we've been in consultation with our colleagues throughout the Bay Area and with the State Health Department, and we believe that our views are consistent with consensus of most public health professionals in the Bay Area who are dealing with this issue. And when we're asked by policymakers like yourselves or by community residents like those people here in the room or ourselves, because we also live in the spray zone, about what are the potential health impacts of this, we have to answer as follows. You know, really this is relatively a low risk, but in order to really make any kind of definitive statement or more definitive statement, we need more information. We cannot say anything definitive about the health risks, nor answer the kinds of questions that were raised today without a credible and independent health risk assessment. We are aware of the consensus statement that's been prepared by the Department of Pesticide Regulation and the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. And that has some value as far as it goes. But it is not a health risk assessment. A health risk assessment would look at the acute and chronic toxicity of the kinds of chemicals that are being sprayed. And by the way, you can't do a health risk assessment until it's been clearly identified what material is going to be sprayed, not only the pheromone, but the kind of carrier materials. That's essential for a health risk assessment. And then that assessment would look at the acute and chronic toxicity of those materials. It would evaluate pathways of exposure, inhalation, dermal pathways, ingestion, and so on. It would look at the possible impacts of repeated exposures, like every 30 days for 3 years. It would look at the potential implications of not just ordinary people, but also people who may be particularly sensitive receptors, people like children, people with chronic lung disease or other underlying circumstances. And it would look at possible synergistic effects with this spraying on other kinds of exposures that people might be exposed to. That's what a health risk assessment would do. We think also that, you know, our colleagues in the agricultural department and academia and so on need to evaluate the various possible ways of treating the LBAM, including looking at the option of no treatment at all, and that those various options can be then factored into a health risk assessment. Based on this kind of health risk assessment and evaluation of the various options, you as the policymakers would have the best information that would be available about the possible benefits of different options and the possible health risks of different options. You know, nothing's going to be 100%, and there will be uncertainties in this. But based on that kind of health risk assessment and an analysis of different options, including doing nothing, you would be in a position to make the best informed risk-benefit decision on how this should go forward. We think this kind of health risk assessment can be done in a timely manner. I don't know what the urgency of this is. That's not my area of expertise, but people are talking about doing spraying in July or August. That provides an adequate amount of time to do a competent and credible health risk assessment before any spraying is actually done. And that would provide the kinds of answers to the questions that people behind us have raised and the kind of information that you as policymakers would need. I do want to acknowledge one issue on this, and that some of the agricultural people have raised it, including the agricultural agent here from Marin. Some of the options of not using the LBAM might involve the use of the requirement of using more toxic pesticides like organic phosphates later. Those are more toxic. They would have health impacts, and that would have to be figured in to a risk-benefit health impact assessment. But that is our recommendation, that there be a credible and independent, competent health risk assessment, and it can be done in a timely manner.
If I may, Doctor, who would conduct such a credible and independent assessment in a timely manner?
There's a variety of options or possibilities. One possibility might be the Department of Public Health, but either the Department of Public Health or others might decide that it should be conducted outside of one of the government agencies, in which case there's a variety of academic agencies or even independent consulting firms that have a track record and expertise and a track record for credibility.
Any questions, Senator Migden, before we go on to Paul Shramsky from Ecological and Environmental Considerations? Thank you both, doctors, and thank you both for your work. Paul Shramsky, Executive Director of Pesticide Watch, are you still with us?
I'm still here.
Thank you for your patience.
No, thank you for holding this hearing. Thank you again, Senators, for holding this hearing, and I especially want to thank you for listening to the concerns of the public prior to the rest of us speaking. I think I felt the task of, in the past few months and at the last hearing in these chambers, of trying to address all those concerns presented by the public, and I like that burden being lifted. So thank you again for holding this hearing. Again, my name is Paul Shramsky. I'm the State Director of Pesticide Watch. We're a public health and environmental group that works side by side with communities to clean up and prevent pesticide pollution and pesticide exposure. We've been working on this issue for some months. We were actually initially called by residents in the Monterey Bay area, then in your district, Senator, with many of the concerns. I was asked to speak to the ecological and environmental considerations and wish to add to some of the concerns of the public too. I'm here representing, I think, in some sense, the 12,000 people that have signed the petition online opposing the spray. 8 now cities and counties, I believe, that have passed resolutions opposing the spray, and 30 statewide environmental groups that oppose spraying, from Breast Cancer Fund, the Planning and Conservation League, Environment California, Sierra Club California, and many others. This is just the beginning. At Pesticide Watch, we believe that everyone has a right to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and live in a healthy and safe community. I think those are not far-fetched beliefs. I think we can all agree that first and foremost, we want to control the apple moth. This is not something we disagree with. I don't disagree with Secretary Kawamura here, and this has never been the problem. Where we disagree with the state is what the problem is, and depending on that problem, what tools we should use. From Dr. Harder and Dr. Carey, we have learned that the moth is likely more pervasive than previously thought throughout Northern California. Our biggest concern is that the state has not made the case for dealing with this moth. USDA and CDFA have rushed to declare this pest an emergency and rushed to create solutions to eradicate this perceived emergency. So I think it's important to revisit some of our greatest concerns. The CDFA sprayed these untested pheromone pesticide products over the Monterey Bay area and plans to do the same in June, moving northwards to the San Francisco Bay Area in August. Now, CDFA stresses that the pheromone-based products are one of the safest eradication tools available, and that environmentalists want pheromone pest controls. While many environmental and organic agricultural groups have advocated for pheromone use for many years, the formulation and encapsulation in plastic of products being used in this case, the lack of testing of human exposure and their aerial application differentiate them from environmentally preferable pheromone products, such as stationary bait traps. A simple search, to underscore that, I would also note that there has been a mischaracterization of some of the stances of my colleagues at Pesticide Action Network and NRDC that do not go out on a limb to support this proposed spraying effort. In fact, upon reading those actual statements and the statements coming forward from those organizations in the next week, those will be made further clear that they oppose any efforts to spray and support safer alternatives. A simple search of the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health will yield information that a majority of these so-called inert ingredients are toxic to aquatic species, raise concerns about damage to endocrine systems, to reproductive systems, among others. These were the same that were sprayed throughout the Monterey Bay area near waterways, and would likely be sprayed near waterways throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. These products, again, just to remember, and I think it hasn't been made explicitly clear, are, again, a plastic capsule, including an actual pheromone ingredient, but then made up of many actual inert, so-called inert ingredients that are chemically and toxicologically active. We have also learned that the state agencies...
Mr. Shramsky, can I ask you to try and wrap up as quickly as
Certainly.
possible here? Thank you.
I'll actually just go to my conclusions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Some of the other concerns I had were about the particle size, the exposure for the 2 to 10 year range has been proposed to the legislature, and the actual spraying over urban populations. We believe agency resources should be spent on monitoring and prevention of invasive species before extraordinary measures such as those proposed for LBAM become necessary, and for intensified research in and increased capacity to implement ecological pest management. We call for full disclosure and open discussion with affected communities of the extent of the LBAM infestation, of realistic estimates of damage to date and predicted damage, of all ingredients, both active and inert, of pest control products in use or under consideration, those 3 proposed in the coming months, and of health risks associated with a variety of control measures, and of the efficacy of these measures. Therefore, CDFA and USDA should establish a good faith moratorium on aerial pesticide spraying and potentially toxic ground-based solutions, and finish conducting a full environmental impact report first.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
And we're going to do this. We're going to go to Ms. Migden for any wrap-up comments if she likes. I'll have a couple of comments as well. My comments will address sort of the where do we go from here part in terms of the use of today's information. For those of you who had written testimony, particularly if we weren't able to let you share it all today, please share it with the committee staff who are here so that it will become a formal part of the record. And then why don't we go to Ms. Migden and see if there are either comments or questions that you want to offer at this time, Senator.
Thank you very much. And firstly, I'd like us all, because we're not allowed to applaud, but to raise our hands if we appreciate the chair and his terrific induction of this meeting and coming in on our behalf.
Well, for that, we could have made an exception.
Into a spank and punishment approach here. He's just a terrific, intelligent asset to our legislature, and I think you've all seen that, just how intelligent. So I'm personally very appreciative, and I also like to show off just the extent of, the camaraderie and the intelligence of the Senate caucus. So I appreciate him willing, and also the Environmental Safety Committee. So, notwithstanding my very good conversation with the Agriculture Secretary earlier this week, and those conversations we both agreed would continue. And we know that what we stand to try to do here is to convince the state and federal government to not spray us within the 6-month period. And without applause or anything else, that I believe we have all said, and certainly testimony here seems to suggest that this moth may have been around for a while. It may not create that deep a threat, that there are questions about dissolving the plastics. There are questions about whether we know everything about the compound and what the ingredients are. And we called, I want to point out that after hearing reports on early February, mid-February, we introduced SCR 87, which calls for a moratorium. And there's nothing that, and what it says is let us not spray until we know for sure it's safe and effective. It's very simple. It seems that nothing I've heard today suggests that, this insistence upon the proof of effectiveness as well as proof of health safety, that request for a moratorium in light of testimony doesn't seem rash or extreme. So I have been pleased that the department has stated we're going to do intermediary measures to see if there is some containment. I'm saying to the public this is one in a series of forums because we're committed to monitoring this process as it continues. And we believe we've got 6 months before this action is proposed. And therefore, we want to continue to make our case. With regard to environmental review and other things, those are bills in the legislature. Maybe they get signed, they'll be signed next year, they'll be effective years after. We're trying to, right now today, safeguard a situation to prevent it from happening now so that our future is not in jeopardy. All those measures are good ideas. So I will say to the public here, that I'm committed to working responsibly with you and health officials to secure the kind of information and proof that we're asking for, to not be guinea pigs, to not be subjected to human experiments if we believe, and I've heard enough testimony from experts to suggest that there is not consensus as to the effectiveness, as to the likelihood of a great prevalence of invasion, as to the effects it has upon human beings. And I think we're all committed to having and creating a forum like this where people can speak frankly, forthrightly, and clearly about their concerns. I want to thank the Secretary for the health officials who might have stated positions that look a little contrary to those held by our audience. That takes great bravery and forthrightness, and I respect it because we're looking for an exchange of information. And frankly, we've had too many incidents where hindsight isn't effective in protecting us. So we need absolutes and not maybe as to the concentration, the frequency, the exposure. And I believe that we don't want to regret. And lastly, it isn't anyone's fault that there's little faith in the federal government and its insistence upon what we believe is exposing humans to chemicals that may be dangerous for us. So we stand ready to pay special attention and vigilance to those that claim this is the rightful approach. We just need certainty. We're unsure. We feel as if we cannot. Most particularly, I want to say, when I hear that the moth has been here for 40 years, then I don't know why we have to take an extreme measure immediately in a few months. And I think many of us want answers to those questions. So I say our resolution stands. We're pushing it forward and ask for a moratorium until and unless we know it's safe and effective. And I don't believe information today cleared up those outstanding questions.
Thank you, Senator Migden. Secretary Kawamura and Dr. Dowell, we had to curtail your comments earlier today. Thank you for understanding that we were in a little behind schedule here. There were a lot of comments made today that I suspect you'll want an opportunity to respond to at some time. I'm guessing that this is not the moment for that response. Is that but I don't want to sort of, if there are one or two key points or observations you want to make before we step away from the chambers here today, I don't want to curtail your ability to briefly respond. We had so many things. We have a record of those, and that's for reasons that I'll explain in just a moment.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I do thank you for this opportunity to basically do both, have a dialogue here, listen to both the concerns, and the concerns continue to be very much the same that we had in Monterey and Santa Cruz, and they don't fall on deaf ears. We continue to hear the challenges for that part of the community that is hypersensitive, whether it's asthma or some of the other challenges that come in a complicated world that we live in. And we certainly are taking that into consideration. We certainly saw that someone had set an example for the world. We thought by using a pheromone in an eradication was kind of doing just that moving away from some of the other class of old generation pesticides, that this is one way to move forward and do an eradication of a difficult species that we don't want here in the environment or in our food supply. And yet we certainly have not done a good job in coming up with the information to make people feel comfortable why would we be doing this, especially with an aerial application, let alone on a ground attack. And so we know that there's a lot of problems with that. The environmental impact report, it is continuing to go forward at this point, and will hopefully be done in early summer. I recognize that, as was mentioned many times, why is that report not done? And I would hope that it can be done and give us all some information to work with, and we will hopefully, it could possibly be done in time for our applications. I don't know that though. In addition to that, I wanted to make sure that someone, I don't know that. In addition, I want to make sure there's still some very common misconceptions out there. Part of the reason we chose this pheromone with this application was specifically so we wouldn't affect native pollinators and domesticated pollinators, both bees and the other important insects that do the pollination work in this state, as well as other beneficials. Those are very important part of the package of IPM, Integrated Pest Management, and when we use some of the other tougher materials that would kill those or impact those populations, we all agree that that's not a good solution set, and that was again why we moved in this direction. Someone had mentioned about the move of making a decision. Obviously, my position here is not an easy position. My predecessor, Secretary Lyons, had much of the same kind of decisions. When we go back to whatever kind of governor sits in the seat, whether it's Governor Brown, whether it's Governor Duke-Agee, Governor Wilson, it's not a matter of the politics that take place within this state on whether policy to deal with invasives is good or not. I just want to make that as a statement. We get that thrown out a lot, that this is all about politics. Please, it's not about politics. It's a policy, but trying to do the right thing. And certainly by what I heard today and what we continue to hear, especially the fears, whether it's from high school kids that are afraid of things in the environment and not an ability to understand just what we're trying to accomplish, we have a lot of work to do. So I don't think I need to say much more than that, other than I appreciate your willingness to listen, that this is a food pest as well as an environmental pest, that this is a challenge that we face as a society together, and that certainly if the public can understand what our department does, or Fish and Game does, or what Health Services does, they're not going to be able to support what we do, and our mission then as an agency is impacted. So we have to do a better job of communicating that to the public.
Thank you very much. By way of wrap up the comment, let me just offer these observations. There are, as many of you here will know, a half dozen legislative efforts currently pending in the state legislature, both the Assembly and the Senate. And the Senate Environmental Quality Committee will ultimately be the venue in which those legislative proposals are heard. The first among them will be Senator Migden's measure, because it's on the Senate side, and those bills will get and resolutions will get to us first. The benefit of today's hearing, the reason that I thought it was such a good idea to be here and have this conversation, is that given the number of bills that move through our system, it's rarely possible for us to have an extended dialogue like this one on any individual piece of legislation. So the hope was that by collecting information in this setting, that would inform not only me as the chair of the committee, but also the staff who have been kind enough to be with us here today, so that when the time comes to hear and evaluate the other proposals that are pending in the legislature, we'll be the beneficiaries of your comments today, both the formal presenters and the members of the public who spoke. Finally, as Senator Migden mentioned earlier, we are to some extent bound to a timeline that is the legislative timeline, which is not always necessarily convenient or helpful in terms of the need to take action sooner rather than later, or to stop taking action sooner rather than later. And so it seemed, both Senator Migden and myself, that there was value in providing a public forum, sort of in addition to and apart from the utility that it would have in bringing information into the legislative process. And I think I will just add my thanks to that of Senator Migden. Senator Migden and her staff have been wonderful partners in helping us pull this effort together. My thanks to her for her work in pulling this together, and also for her leadership on the issue. Thanks to Zach, the intern, for getting me to the right room, by the way. That was particularly helpful and important. Thank you to the environmental quality staff who were here, to all of our presenters, to the Sergeant at Arms, and most importantly to all of our presenters and the members of the public who spoke. Senator Migden assured me that she had a bright, articulate, thoughtful, and opinionated constituency. She has been proven correct on all counts. It's been my pleasure to be with her here today. Without objection, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.